The US starts to see inflationary pressures really from late 1965 onward. And those initial pressures are tied to the Vietnam War mobilization, which happens without time or political will for there to be adjustments in the economy other than inflation. In the late 1970s, there's a lot of pressure on the US dollar in international currency markets. And that dollar crisis is really the immediate reason that Volcker gets appointed to the Federal Reserve. By 1979, which is when the Volcker Shock occurs, these various causes of crisis had led business to organize in a big way, trying to push against consumer protections, against regulation of all kinds, against labor unions. And so essentially what Volcker does is say that the solution to inflation is unemployment, and not just a little bit of unemployment, but unemployment that will be really extreme and politically painful. Reagan is basically supportive of Volcker's policy of a recession because Reagan has this political project of breaking the labor movement in the US. And Reagan and his advisors think that unemployment is a great complement to this strategy because a union doing collective bargaining in the middle of a depression is going to ask for a lot less than one bargaining in the middle of a tight labor market. The Volcker Shock and the recession which it created were really bad for workers, and especially, unionized workers in these manufacturing industries. And it really causes a lot of human suffering, especially in certain places like, Youngstown, Ohio, or Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. When the Fed decides that it's going to control inflation by causing unemployment, that is just sort of ipso facto a hugely disproportionate assault on Black workers. Because at any given time, Black unemployment is much higher than white unemployment. And so if we're thinking about how is it that Volcker was able to build popular support for something which involved a manufactured recession? I think it's really important for us to remember that a disproportionate part of the cost was borne by Black workers. It's unclear whether Volcker thinks about this much, but even if we don't think there's individual bad intentions, there's still a sort of way that, the central bank has a really good representation of financial interests, but there's no labor representative sitting on the Fed committee that makes decisions about interest rates. There's certainly no representative of the African-American community. That goes too for the third world debt crisis. In some ways, the effects are most serious abroad. Over the 70s, a lot of countries of the third world had become increasingly indebted. The Volcker Shock makes these debts so hard to pay back that the countries need a bailout, and the people giving the bailout are able to demand a lot in exchange. It's sort of a new way of exercising international power, but which leads to really dramatic consequences. So if you're looking at the history of Mexico or Brazil, these are years of deindustrialization because the sort of conditions of being rescued from their debt involve policies that make domestic investment and that sort of thing completely impossible. One of the big lessons I've drawn from reading, transcripts of Federal Reserve discussions is that while monetary policy sometimes seems like this abstract technical thing, if you actually just try to get inside the way that the central bankers themselves thought about things, it's a very concrete and almost simple, story of class struggle. And they're not really that confused or uncertain on that point.